What's up guys, Brandon here from Gearist. Today we're going to be taking a look at the predecessor to the wildly successful Clifton from Hoka One One, and that is the Clifton 2 from Hoka One One. Due to a small lapse in communication between us and Hoka, we absolutely missed out on the juggernaut that was the first version of this shoe. However, there was apparently some room for improvement and Hoka did just that, so let's get into it. Since I didn't review the first version of this shoe, much of this is going to be standalone commentary about just this shoe. However, here and there we will point back to the OG Clifton, but if you have experience in that shoe and have any comments, we'd love to hear them down in the comments section below. And while you're at it, why don't you go ahead and give this video a like, a favorite, and subscribe to our channel. The outsole of the Clifton 2 is identical from what we can tell from the Clifton 1, and in its full contact setup puts that early stage meta rocker that Hoka is known for right into play in the midsole. The outsole, this guy sports rubber only where they think it needs to be, and that, as you can see here, is these red sections up here in the forefoot and then again back here in the rear foot. The rest of this is exposed EVA foam, and all of it, the whole thing, is arranged into these kind of hexagonal pods, which you can see right there, both the foam and the rubber material, which leaves a lot of open room for some really nice flex screws that kind of come into play in a shoe like this. When it comes to traction, which I think is actually pretty important in a shoe with this much stack and perceived kind of maybe possible instability, the traction is actually really quite good in this. In damp and dry conditions, I felt no problems at all, and I even actually ran on this where there were some still snowy patches on the pavement on which I was running. Now, from a durability perspective, I kind of experienced some mixed things. On the one hand, on the roughly 40 miles that I have on the shoe, the rubber has held up exceptionally well. I mean, it has done very, very well. I don't see any really accelerated wear at all. I can see basically exactly what I would see in any other shoe. However, where I do see some accelerated wear is on the exposed EVA foam midsole here, especially right under the midfoot. Now, you can see, I'll kind of hold it up to the camera, it's a little bit chewed up right through there. Why is that? Well, that's because that's primarily where I land. I tend to be a very midfoot, forefoot runner, and this is going to be the main focus point of my landing. Now, on the one hand, this is no different than any other shoe. I would expect wear to be there on any shoe with an exposed EVA midsole there, or even rubber sometimes, depending on the hardness of the rubber. You can see an accelerated wear in that area in my particular gait. In this case, what's interesting is since that meta rocker shape encourages landing there, you're going to probably see accelerated wear in that area. I didn't notice it affect the ride at all, but I just think it is worth mentioning in terms of durability. It's pretty clear that leaving that rubber off is really a weight consideration, and something which has as much foam as this does in the midsole, you want to save weight where you can. If it were me, I would personally extend this rubber up that lateral side there. Now, the reason for that is that because apart from this area that's a little chewed up, basically all this exposed EVA foam on the medial side is completely unscathed. It's only over here where we really see that wear. It would certainly add a bit of weight, but I think it would be worth it in the long run. Moving into the midsole, the Clifton 2 does sport that maximalist look that we're known for from Hoka One One, and this in this case has actually 29 millimeters of stack in the heel, 24 millimeters of stack in the forefoot for a net drop of 5 millimeters. I'd also like to point out that the foot doesn't actually sit on top of this black line of foam that you're seeing there. The foot actually sits, if you can see this little crease, the foot actually sits kind of right down in there because the inside, that insole, the sock liner, actually dips down and creates kind of this bathtub-like area. On the one hand, this creates a really secure feeling in the heel and all that kind of stuff, but it brings you more close to the shoe and allows that upper to be more custom to the foot. The feel of the Clifton 2 is admittedly something that I wouldn't necessarily reach for. It's a little more plush. However, that does not stop me from appreciating what a lot of people are looking for in this, and that's that good cushioned underfoot ride. With all this compression molded EVA, it actually was a nice kind of change from what I experienced in the Speed Goat. If you didn't see that review, click right here, you can check it out and just give a look at that review. But this actually had quite a bit of lateral stability and stability overall. But keep in mind, this is a neutral shoe, not a stability shoe. But I mean stability in terms of there was no lateral or medial wonkiness when I was running in this. There is a pretty reasonable amount of flexibility, especially in the front third of the shoe, which you can see right there. As you move into the back, the foam simply becomes too thick to really be that flexible. I do touch on this more in a bit in the ride section, but just for now, just keep in mind that the flexibility up in the forefoot is nice. It allows a good amount of flex in that area. I did feel a break-in period for this shoe, which was right about 20 miles. Now, up until that point, it had been really quite bouncy, and then it didn't like lose its bounce or anything like that, but it settled down, and I feel like it became a more consistent ride for me, which I really enjoyed. Now let's move into talking about the upper, which according according to what I've read and seen about people saying things about the Clifton One, is where the most significant changes are in this shoe. In the first version, durability was apparently a bit of a problem, and in this, that's one of the things that Hoka has sought to fix. Now, their mesh that we've got here is a single layer mesh, and the support structure, all these bonded overlays, which you can see right there. A couple of those overlays right here on the side are pulling off a little bit for me. It's not that it's tearing or anything like that, and I don't think it's really compromising the structure, but it is pulling away from the shoe a little bit right there. Apart from that, thus far I've had no issues with durability, picking in the fabric or anything like that. Now, one of the additions in this shoe is this pretty solid toe bumper right here, which is again kind of beefy for a road shoe, but it does a good job of shaping out the toe box and creating some space. Kind of ironically and kind of paradoxically, at the same time as it creates a shape, it kind of limits some of the space in that the foot can't really flex up into that very much. Moving into the rear of the shoe, there's actually quite a bit of flexibility in the heel counter back here, and I think that part of the reason they can get away with that is once again due to that midsole material that comes up and around the heel a little bit. From what I understand, two of the biggest updates that came on this shoe were updating and beefing up the tongue and the heel counter. Now, the tongue in version 1 was apparently some sort of neoprene material, but here they've gone for the same kind of backed mesh that they have used around the rest of the shoe, but they've backed it with a good deal of foam. I actually think it's quite comfortable. There's not too much foam at all, and it just kind of works well. Now, into the heel counter. Now, if you've heard my reviews before, you know that too much foam in the heel counter is one of the things that I'm kind of a stickler about because I feel like it pushes the foot forward in a shoe, and that is sort of the case in this. As you can see, there's a good amount of foam right there, but honestly, it doesn't need to quite be that much. Every now and then, especially if I was going slower or kind of cruising, I felt the foot kind of sliding forward, not way forward, I wasn't jammed or anything like that, but just not in contact with the rear of the heel counter there. That is something that I would have preferred, and I, to be honest, wish they would kind of get rid of a little bit of this because the foam underneath, the thinner foam, is actually plenty there. There's not a need for quite so much. It's not super overbuilt as some that we've seen, but it is, again, a little more that needs to be there in my opinion. Moving into the fit, if you read or watched my review of the Hoka One One Speed Goat, then you know that the fit was not great for me, and so I have to admit that I was a little bit skeptical moving into this shoe, but thus far my skepticism has really been kind of squashed, and I'm very happy with much of the fit in this. First, the rear foot fit is actually really good. Now again, this does push my foot forward a little bit, but when my foot is locked down in that heel, it feels really nice. And moving into the midfoot, it's actually also a really great fit. I can see where some people who may really not lock down on those laces, which if you're doing that, please stop. Just don't tie so tightly. But I can see where this kind of adjusted tongue might play into that well. Getting into the toe box, it kind of left me wanting a little bit more. Now, I mentioned a second ago that this toe bumper creates a nice kind of structure, but the shape is a little bit thin. Now, I should mention that on the one hand, this is very average, and my foot was totally fine in it, so don't think I'm really super knocking it. I'm just saying that, like I say with a lot of other shoes, I wish there were a little bit more room for some toe wiggle and splay. As for sizing, my size 11s felt spot on, but again, you know, this foam here kind of pushes the foot forward a little bit, but I really did feel very comfortable right in my size 11s. By all accounts, the Clifton 2 has gained about a full ounce over the Clifton 1. Now, one of the things that you notice about this shoe is that the eye sees a shoe that's got this much stack and all that and expects to feel something in hand that's heavier than this is. This shoe right here, for my size 11, comes in at 9.4 ounces, which for a shoe with this much foam really isn't that much. So it's kind of startling when you pick something up like this and you don't feel so much underneath. While this thing doesn't exactly disappear on my foot as some shoes do, it doesn't also feel like a dead weight just kind of hanging there. The general ride is actually one of kind of a tale of two midsoles for me. Now, on the one hand, out of the box, it was really bouncy, almost to the case of being a little unstable. Just kind of, not unstable, but just a little unsure feeling. But after it settled down, you know, again, after that initial 20 miles or so, I really enjoyed the feel of this. It was pretty responsive and gave me some of that spring, but also wasn't so bouncy that I felt like I was out of control. As with other rocker-soled shoes, the Meta Rocker in this I'm a big fan of. To encourage that midfoot landing makes you much more efficient if you're not overstriding and keeps things just in a really solid place for me, and I really enjoyed it in this guy. Ground feel in this shoe is kind of minimal, but that's, again, what you expect from a cushioned shoe like this. And, kind of ironically, while the ground feel was minimal, I was quite aware of the position of my foot, which enhanced the balance, especially once that foam settled out. I didn't feel myself as being unstable or way up on like a stilt kind of shoe or anything like that at all. For what it is, the shoe has some responsiveness, but overall in the grand scheme of what's a responsive shoe versus non-responsive, it's not so responsive. And part of the reason for that is, again, because of this much stuff underfoot and the inability to really feel the ground to a kind of high degree. But if you're looking for this shoe, that's probably not what you're really looking for. You're probably looking for a peppy shoe that's got that cushion underfoot. So while you can still feel that bounce to a large degree, you're not going to be beat up by ramming into the road or perception of ramming into the road. I gotta tell you that I am very glad that my experience in the Clifton 2 is better than the Speed Goat, because this is a brand, the Hoka One brand is a brand that's gotten some really fantastic traction, no pun intended, once they've come onto the market. And they're not really just kind of staying some imaginary course where they keep hammering on something that doesn't work. There are a lot of people that love this shoe and love the whole entire ethos of the Hoka One brand. And so it's good. I'm very happy to have had a good experience in this shoe. This is definitely a shoe that's going to make plush seekers very happy. And while there are admittedly some biomechanical issues that arise from a shoe with this much cushioning, we've had commenters comment on this before, I have to say that I'm surprised, while the ground feel wasn't spectacular, I'm surprised at how much my foot could interact with the shoe. That being said, it was kind of almost an extension of the ground to some degree, which made me kind of happy. At $130, it may be perceived as a little bit of an investment, but again, check out the buy links down below for some cheaper versions of this. It's still right in there with its peers, so not over the top expensive. Now, before we get into the question of the day, please go ahead and subscribe to our channel by clicking this button right here. You can also give us a like and a favorite. That would mean a lot and be a massive help. Now, our question of the day for you guys is, what Hoka One shoes have you run in? Did you run in the Clifton 1 and 2? And if you did, what are the big differences that you noticed, good or bad? Let's hear it down in the comments section below. Guys, thanks so much for spending a few minutes with us today. If you've got any questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out to us on social media or email info@gearist.com or just visit gearist.com. We'd also love to hear your comments down in the comments section below. Guys, thanks again so much, and we'll see you next time.